Everybody to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Jeremy Burgess with the Insurance Network, and delighted to see so many people back with us again to talk about creating a London market business model for the future. And we're going to be talking about innovation, how to build agility into operations and create sustainable advantage. As always with these sessions, we want to make them as interactive as possible. So you can see the chat on the right-hand side. Do get involved, ask your questions as we go through the sessions, and I'll try and bring as many of those in as possible. And at the end of the session, we'll invite you to join us on a Zoom call where you can come and join the panelists, and we'll carry on the discussions, and you'll have a chance to share your experiences as well after the event. So today we're looking at kind of three areas, if you like. The first is, what does a future kind of London market insurer and broker look like, and how do we get there? What are some of the operational challenges that we need to consider in order to be sort of dynamic and scalable in the future? And how do we ensure these changes really make an impact on the customer experience? So kind of three areas that we'd like to cover. But as I say, do get involved in the chat and submit your questions as we go through. I'd like to introduce kind of the panel today. We have three panelists. We've got Stephen Carter, CEO of Carbon Underwriter, Brian Kirwan, who's partner at McGill Partners and formerly CEO of Allianz Global Corporate, and Adrian Guttridge, who is with WNS Global Services. And just while we switch their cameras on, I'm going to ask you, the audience, to vote in the first of our polls this afternoon. So the first question that I'd like to put to you is, do you feel business operating models in the London market are innovating quickly enough to meet client expectations? Take part in the vote and you get to see the results, and we will come back in 10 seconds. Here's 10 seconds on the clock. There we are, the first of our polls there. Welcome, gents, firstly, to the webinar. Stephen, I hope you can hear us. I know we had a few audio issues. Okay, great. So, Adrian, welcome to the webinar. Good response there, I think. Yes, but could be increased. So, you know, that's pretty positive.
Yes, absolutely. My first reaction would be that's great that people are seeing innovation happening. The key thing is it happening at the right pace? And just over half the audience think it is. So that's absolutely great news. And especially to meet client expectations. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the webinar. But yeah, I think that's encouraging, but also there's more to be done, obviously, with the 43% saying no. I imagine actually for a lot of people this isn't just a straight yes/no answer, that actually they're on a journey of some sort. So they've probably done some innovation, but maybe further to go.
So we've got the first of our three questions, and I'm going to pose this first one to you, Brian. Brian, welcome. What does the future London market insurer and broker look like, and how do we successfully get there? So a nice, easy one to start with.
Yeah, thank you. I was saying the last time I spoke on this topic, I think I was speaking to about 300 people at a conference with PowerPoint. So I was able to predict the future then. I don't think I would be predicting that I'd be now on a Zoom call having the same topic. So one, the future is very difficult to figure out. I was lucky to be on the TOM board when I was working in my Allianz days, and to struggle with a few of these issues and try to think through them. But fundamentally, when I came through it, it was, look, you have to follow the customers. I think one of the issues we've had as a market, we've looked at ourselves and thought about how do we want to change, what do we want to do, how do we see the future. But fundamentally, the future will be defined by our customers and the speed with which our customers are changing. If we don't move as fast as our customers' expectations relative to our own expectations, the key is that we drive it in that regard. For me, when we looked at this originally, there was huge questions in relation to change management. You know, how do you get the UK, the Lloyds of London face-to-face paper-based model to change? And there was significant voices of concern and significant issues about going digital and how it would impact London and you know, how we were going to trade through it. And we've just pretty much had the biggest change management process in history when we moved from one day basically paper face-to-face to the next day to be digital. And for me, based on some of the work that was done in London, we've proved very successful at doing that. The organizations that were established, such as ourselves, particularly to trade on a cloud-based environment in a modern digital paperless way, have traded, you know, relatively seamlessly through this environment. So what I would say for me, if you look at our customers, what's changing with them? Well, fundamentally, I've a very good friend who has a candle business, which was about 90% retail and you know, a tiny bit online. And I think in 3 months he's gone to 65% online. So if you think about that from a business model point of view, he's moved from having, you know, warehouses, you know, supply in third parties' offices, a lot of exposure to things like fire, well, a candle business, obviously, but I will not crack that joke. But his exposures now are much more digital and much more online. So fundamentally, how he buys insurance, how he thinks about insurance is fundamentally changing. Secondly, the data that these businesses are generating, and all businesses are generating, is significant and up to the minute our daily data. We're still a market that goes year to year on renewal. So I see that there's going to be a significant change in how customers manage their own risk. And therefore, as a market, we have to manage and develop new products designed to work in that digital environment. What I always said to my team was, you have to assume that digital is going to happen. You have to understand the digital environment. And the two things, sorry, I should say, one is that you don't try and just speed up an analog environment. You try and imagine what a digital environment will actually look like. And if the way of the future is not to speed up the past, it's probably going to fundamentally change how we do business and how we think about it. And I suppose a final comment for me, if other people want to join in, is what you have to avoid in my mind and what our thinking about our business is, we thought about technology as basically commoditizing insurance, and we constantly use that phrase. And in my view, some parts will be commoditized, but the future of London and the future of how we think about it is still about value added. We just have to value add our specialty, bring different ways of thinking about risk in a digital environment. What we don't want to do is just commoditize our entire proposition. So fundamentally, change as fast, or if not faster than your customers, develop products that suit their new world, and also be prepared, as we're now seeing, to adapt very quickly to changing environments.
Shall I come in there? And I think in answer to the question, you know, what will they look like? I think you'll see a smaller number of employees for a start. I think there'll be a greater degree of straight-through processing, of course. I think things will be designed around data rather than pure process, with much greater data insights, in fact, that will drive business outcomes. I think you'll see less usage of spreadsheets. Bizarrely, there still are a lot of spreadsheets around. And probably also there should be less robotic process automation. It actually is a bit of a short-term option to link typically legacy systems together. And I would hope that actually, you know, systems are designed in such a way that they are more fully integrated, and as people move to the cloud, that you get a greater degree of APIs. I think overall it'll look like a much more digitally integrated operations model, and by that I mean it's not just looking at, you know, policy underwriting, claims processing, but pulling in finance and HR as well. So you're all working off a similar data platform that actually is going to help drive the business. I think also you'll see, you know, business model designed for the internet. where you'll be cloud native rather than actually taking legacy systems and putting them on the cloud. So I think that's a very different sort of approach. So not evolving an old business model and putting it into a new environment, but actually rethinking what that whole business model should be.
Yeah, it's always worth going last. Actually, everybody else has taken the best sound bites. But I think it's a really interesting question, this, because we're a recently formed business and we are completely set up as a digital business. So we had to make a bet on where the business was going to be and at how we should build our business to recognize that. And our view is very strongly that the digital business has to be far more agile. We are going to have to be more agile. We need to listen and respond to our clients better and faster than we do currently, in terms of both service, in getting the answers they want as quickly as possible, and settling claims faster than we are currently necessarily. And secondly, to be able to develop our products to the challenges that our clients face. And I think we've all had a wake-up call through the COVID-19 situation. Clearly a massive tragedy on a human scale across the globe. But what it's done, I think, for the insurance industry is really shown actually those businesses which are agile enough to actually to respond to this far quickly. Not only in paying claims which are valid, but also recognizing where there are shortcomings and actually developing products to actually satisfy that. So I think there's a number of challenges which we face as to become digital, but it's got to be something which we embrace, because otherwise we're going to be left behind by the tech giants as they come in and commoditize what they can commoditize. And this is absolutely a challenge, I think, and leaving us perhaps with the fag end of the difficult to manage. Whether we can make money out of that, who knows? We have historically, but we're in a changing market. I think we need to recognize that, and the digital challenge is not one we can back away from.
There's a question here in the chat from Pete, which I think follows on from your comment there, Stephen, which is kind of how much cost and effort are you allocating to kind of customer electronic trading versus towards your suppliers, in this case underwriters, and I suppose how much I suppose underlying this is how much of the market will be commoditized and how much will be left to that specialist end. How far can the digitization go to achieve straight through processing in all lines, or what do people think?
Well, I'm very happy to go first on this one, if you like. I think it's an interesting one in so much as when we started our business, we actually, as I said, we started on a digital-based digital platform completely. And all of the information which we garner in terms of data is shared with all the participants in our data chain, through the portal which everybody has access to. So whether that be our upfront cover holder, sorry, let me make it clear, we only write delegated authority business. So we take data directly from our cover holder systems, we manage that data and provide hopefully intelligent outputs. And that's shared with not only the MGA client, but hopefully their client base, with reinsurers, with capital providers, and the brokers in the chain. So we see this as the fastest way of disseminating information. Now, our entire IT budget, apart from the very old school electronic trading platform we had to develop to do it with Lloyd's, has been devoted to that, to getting a faster reaction time, so speed of decision making all the way down the transaction chain.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I mentioned commoditization. Fundamentally as a business, we're combining a cloud-based paperless system with senior professionals with expertise in placement and structuring risk on behalf of our clients. For me, the fundamental challenge for us is to understand where a client sees commoditization and they're not going to pay for it and it's low margin, in which case it goes on a machine and it can be done very effectively. Personally, I haven't been into a bank and I buy most of my stuff direct online, so I don't see a value added in that environment. But when I see large complex risks, gold mines, international programs, there is a need for expertise and to invest in that expertise, but also then to prove that to the client. And that's, for me, the fundamental. The biggest danger of the industry is that you sell complex skill as a commodity, and because you just don't get paid for that business. So I would see our business very much, I suppose, close to an investment bank advisory style business, where you are seen to be adding significant value in the structuring, but all the plumbing around the transaction is digitalized. So that's sort of our vision for the future of what brings large global corporates to London, is around our expertise, our deep expertise in specific areas, but not around, we're not competing on the sort of the plumbing, which we think will be just digital.
To add to that?
Insurers and brokers, and what I see is effort being allocated to both, actually, to the customer end and the supplier. But obviously, typically if you're an underwriter, then your third-party spend is mainly on claims. There's only a certain amount with suppliers that you spend. So there's a lot of focus on injecting the business from brokers efficiently and electronically, and of course, PPL was part of that. And similarly, I see when we work with brokers, are very focused on customer. That's absolutely key. But again, can they pass that data through effectively through to underwriters? So I see both happening, actually. It's whole the ecosystem.
Yeah. Okay. So just before we go onto the next question, which is kind of looking more at those operational, practical challenges, I think while we've got an audience of London market people, and a couple of people have already mentioned the future at Lloyd's and PPL and things like that, and with Blue Print 2 being launched tomorrow, however it's going to be launched, if anyone can let me know, that'd be great in the chat. I'd like to put up the second poll, please, Ellie. And audience, do you feel the Future at Lloyd's initiative will deliver the changes needed to deliver a digital London market? Here's 10 seconds on the clock. I think that's pretty interesting, actually. The I don't know answer came up really strongly when we ran the similar poll at London Market Claims. I think there has been a lack of communication around it, and hence probably the more negative answer there. But any thoughts on that, panel?
It's not a resounding vote of confidence, is it? Really? No. And I think we've got a challenge on our hands anyway in terms of digitization of businesses in the London market. We haven't got a great track record, and I think if you look back at the recent successes, let's take PPL for example. Nobody, I think, fundamentally believes it is the answer to what we really wanted, but it was the best we had at the time, and thank goodness we had it. With the current crisis. So I think our track record on doing this has not been great, and we've always been of the opinion, I mean generally, that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that underpins so many of the issues we face in getting the market from where we were to where we want to be in terms of a digital business. And we need to get out of that mindset. And I think if we can actually demonstrate that and show that we're driving the business forward, and there are real and positive benefits for everybody for the significant expenditure and upheaval that all this change will bring, then we're going to get greater buy-in and greater certainty about the future of it.
I think the I don't know for me is actually probably pretty healthy. This is probably the most complex environment we've seen from an insurance and global trading point of view when you look at all the changes and the variety of potential digital futures. I think as long as the I don't know remains curiosity about trying to figure it out and trying to help drive it, I think that's good, as long as it doesn't turn into skepticism or cynicism because we can't do it. But I think fundamentally, going back to the agile point, that the fundamental thing about agile is that you don't fully understand the future, but you have the speed and adaptability in your business models to make sure that you can pivot to take advantage of what it is. So I think a healthy I don't know that creates agility is probably a very positive thing.
Let's just pick up on that and just delve a bit deep, if I could, with this second question, Stephen, which kind of picks up on both your points about agility and changing mindset. So, and the question is, how are organisations overcoming the practical challenges to develop dynamic and scalable digital platforms, enable a business of the future? And I suppose, how do you approach both the operational and cultural issues that you need to address in order to get that mindset shift that you were talking about? Perhaps I'm going to start with you, Stephen.
Yeah, by all means. Thanks, Jeremy. It's an interesting situation I think we find ourselves in the market. We've been pushed down a digital channel very quickly because of COVID. It really has accelerated people's move to the digital platforms. Greater use of PPL, suddenly that exploded. The challenges like white space coming in, again, that's exploded in terms of its client base and usability. But I don't think these are necessarily the answers. We need to be more open-minded about technology. I think that the central processes which we all use in the London market are an issue still. They are a fundamental barrier to change. At the moment, what we have done generally is to adopt a technology interface between very old processes, and we're only really one step away from a green screen in so many areas of our business. So what we're using is technology to make old processes work more efficiently. We're not really changing the process to match the efficiencies that technology could give us, in my view. And that is something which is quite fundamental across the market, and which the future of Lloyd's has got to address. If it doesn't, then I'm afraid we're going to be stuck in the slow lane again. And our ability to respond faster and to create more efficiency, to drive more efficiency through not only our own bottom lines, but in terms of pricing for the future for our clients. And this is the challenge I think we're going to face. And increasingly, international markets don't face these issues. Our competitiveness is sliding. There is absolutely no question. And we've got to fundamentally address the basic issues, which I think are down to outdated processes and systems, which we've got to update. I think we're getting better, but we don't want to be replicating what we used to do before in the future with better technology. That's my view.
Established firms and startups like McGill and Kirwan. I think for the existing organizations, then legacy plays such a big part. But when you're going on any sort of journey, you've got to take into account that legacy and the constraints it has for you, and probably go on a more phased approach. Of course, if you are a startup, then you've got a blank piece of paper almost to work from. But in itself, then you're building the legacy for the future. So you have to be very careful in the design decisions you take, so that it does stand the test of time. It's so easy to take shortcuts, but actually then that causes you problems further down the line. And as it says here, it doesn't allow a scalable digital future. So I think the challenges are different between existing and startups. There are challenges in both.
Yeah, and I'd echo that. I think it's a huge advantage for us not to have legacy systems and to build on a pace structure, but obviously we have to be very cognizant of the fact that we build a scalable structure that continues to deliver as the market changes. So I fully understand that. And then I think what I would say, we always talk about change, but then you have to look at the resources in the market that are there to affect that change. So if we believe that it's a fully data-driven structure where companies are supplying us with vast data that needs to be analyzed very quickly and restructured and deliver certain decisions in terms of either risk or claims, are we hiring the right people, the right diverse people? Has the market been built for this data-led future? Probably not. If you look at what it's been structured on, it's been structured on a different business model. So fundamentally, the market also has to look about who is hired, what are the skill sets that are going to fit into this new world. Otherwise, what we'll just do is continue to try and structure old solutions against a new world. So I think there's fundamental thinking about the future in terms of, right, what is the skill set that is most appropriate to take advantage of it.
And I think that talent challenge has been talked about for a number of years, but I think is becoming more acute now, especially in a time of crisis where you've got not, I don't know whether you use generation, but you've got the next set of leaders coming through that are probably reassessing where, the types of organizations that they want to work for that are going to be sustainable in the future. And they're probably looking around going, well, they're mainly tech businesses. And then they're looking at the London market going, well, how do those organizations stack up with a Google or whatever? And I think there's a big piece of work to be done around, bringing the market up to speed in terms of technology and the way that it works, but also then selling it to the next generation of people, students or graduates or whatever it is, to come in, because like you say, Brian, there's going to be a different skill set needed, and traditionally we've had a challenge trying to recruit those skills in, I'd suggest.
Jeremy,
no, please go.
For those, then that you will attract talent to the market if you can demonstrate that actually, for example, the future at Lloyd's is going to deliver a dynamic digital future. Then I think talent can come into the market and more importantly, stay in the market as well.
I'd like to add to that, Adrian, because one of the challenges I always thought we would have as a very data-driven business was actually recruiting quality people that are not, completely imbued in insurance. That's the last thing we wanted. We want to bring people with skills from outside into our business. Our first 2 recruits are data scientists, none of which have any experience of anything other than buying their own insurances. And they are so excited about coming into this and see it as a huge, empty playing field, then they can set their own rules for it. And the quality of the talent that is out there, if you move outside of the insurance space, is fantastic. We've got one coming from a hedge fund and another one coming from a health insurer. I lied slightly. But, the skills they bring. And I go back, in fact, to when PPL was being proposed as, we were looking for a placing platform. I was working for a service provider at the point, and we wanted to make a bid to the market to say, we'd like to be involved in building this platform, at least competing for it. And we had one of the big consultancies who built platforms for NASDAQ, in fact. And you can imagine the sort of data they sort of manage in the nanoseconds. It knocks us into a cocked hat. And we felt this was quite compelling. We know insurance, they know data and technology. We came to the market with it. It went to the board, and they said, no, I'm sorry, we can only consider anybody who would bring knowledge of and have transacted insurance policies electronically, which automatically meant there were only 2 candidates, which was exchanging and PPL. To my mind, that was a complete disaster, because even if they weren't interested in what we were suggesting, why would you not take the knowledge which is being offered for free to help your understanding and develop it? And this is one of the problems we have fundamentally, I believe, in the London market. We are so closed to what is happening outside. We need to bring that information in, bring that skill set in. And it's down to recruiting the best talent to deliver that, I think.
Yeah, I think, and it's slightly controversial, I think you have to stay very true to your vision. One of the dangers from talking to some other, not just our market, but some other people in the sales environment, is that this environment actually benefits people with long-standing relationships, in that it's a very unusual environment. It's very hard to introduce new relationships. So people who can pick up the phone to people they've known already actually have sometimes an easier pathway, even though they're not digitally as aware as other people. So one of the fundamental things, we need to continue to hire people and find ways to drive their relationships in this new environment. So to make sure that we bring that new generation through. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but it's just something a couple of people have mentioned in relation to, how do you generate new business in an environment where you're on a Zoom call or Microsoft Teams call? Can you shift business? Can you build that relationship that's probably been built up in the traditional market in a different way? So I think we very much have to find that solution with this generation coming through, that they can build up deep relationships, but maybe in a different way.
another Adrian, which is about the problem being at middle management level. It's not about recruiting key digital skills, but it's about those middle managers actually not being supported, driving through change. It's interesting actually, because one of the things I've noticed is that COVID seems to have a bigger impact on modernisation in the London market and true adoption of PPL and other things, and really execs truly now starting to understand what digital really means. I think it's had a huge impact, and that's interesting. It's taken something like COVID to make some of that change in mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like to ask the audience, as I say, Ellie, could you put the third of the polls up, which develops this theme that we've just been talking about? So what do you consider to be the biggest challenge you face when implementing transformational change within your organisation? I know that it is not one of these things, but you have to choose one, and here's 10 seconds on the clock. So that's it's pretty interesting, sort of the culture shift mindset coming out on top, closely followed by legacy technology. I think no surprise there. I don't know. I don't think so. No.
Yeah, no surprise. So constraints of culture mindset and constraints of technology. Actually, technology has been around for a long time. I started my career as a developer. I remember working on the CHAP system, Clearinghouse Automated Payment System, which was same-day payment clearance in the banking industry that we put live in the early 80s. 13 clearing banks all working together. And it's really interesting to make the comparison with what happened then with encryption devices and all sorts of things, and where the market is. The technology has not been the problem. I think in the market, it has been about a vision and culture.
Yeah.
But finally, I think at least Future at Lloyd's, I think, is one of the stepping stones to start to address that.
And I think, let's say, look, the burning platform that we're currently in terms of change management has shown that while it might be mindset, there's a motivational issue that suddenly people had to do it, sort of like this London Stock Exchange. You don't see people looking to go back to trading face-to-face for some of those shares. But so I think there probably was an urgency. What was happening is people were investing in this, but there wasn't a clear differentiation. So you couldn't absolutely see in the short term the enhanced performance or the lower costs of some of the more digital structures versus some of the more traditional structures. I think that's going to change. And therefore you're going to get the mindset will change, because it will have to change, because if you want to compete and you want to get the same numbers as others, you will have to drive the digital agenda. I think unfortunately over the last number of the years we've been able to get away as an industry without having to invest hugely, compared to, let's say, the motor side. If you look at how digital that environment is, or travel, the specialty side hasn't had digital as that much of a differentiation, but I think it will be more of a differentiation going forward.
And that's segues nicely actually into our final kind of question, which is with the customer at the heart. So Adrian, perhaps I could fly this one at you. How do we ensure that these changes improve the customer experience? And I think the reason for this question is quite a lot of the conversations around change and transformation are around our processes, or how do we move data around, rather than what are we doing to impact the customer experience. Have you got any thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's true. That is a problem. I do see a lot of organizations focusing on that lower operating cost model, agile platforms, data-driven rather than process-driven, and capturing data for analytics, lower touch points. So it's all of that. But we also need to keep mindful of the fact that this should be all about the customer and the customer experience. And also, who is the customer, actually? For a broker, that might be the insured. But for the underwriter, who is it? Is it the broker, or is it the insured as well? And sometimes I have seen underwriter firms who absolutely believe that the end customer is their customer too. I think then you need to think about, well, what are the process steps we go through? Everything from quote and pre-bind to post-bind to renewals to endorsements to claims. That's a customer interaction at each of those levels. And how do we use face-to-face telephony, maybe even a self-service portal, even post, etc. And what does that look like as you put together all of those steps, those customer interactions, and actually the components and things you can do to have that interaction? Are you going to make every one of those available? Is it going to have the same sort of customer experience and look and feel? What does that look like? And we've seen other industries tackle that in the past, very, very much so. But actually, that's quite new, I think, here, and we haven't yet addressed that fully. But I think it should always be about that whole customer experience.
Yeah, and I think that's just my old days again. But some of it's quite funny when I remember talking to people say, "Oh, we can pay your claims in a couple of days," and the customer's going, "Well, yeah, that's sort of what I'd expect." We're trying to achieve something that, in a customer's eyes, is already a norm in what they would expect in their digital environment. So some of the stuff we have to do just gets it back to a base level of expectation. We can issue your policy in 30 days. You can't explain that to someone relatively new to the industry. So for me, there's a base level of customer expectation, which is astonishingly high, thanks to companies like Amazon and others, if you've seen how effective they've been. Then the next step, once you've met the very high level of minimum standards, it's how do you differentiate on top of that? And that's, from a broker point of view, that for me is our key challenge and key opportunity, is to deliver structures to the customer that they maybe do not know they need, or structured in a different way. But at least we have to meet the minimum, what I would call very high standard of service.
I think we've got a lot of change to do to accomplish this. And I completely agree with you, Brian and Adrian. The challenge is having that mindset to want to change. I think, as the chat's been quite interesting, actually, the mindset and culture behavior, it comes back to, we are quite traditional in our thinking. And if you look at one of the best applications I've seen in a long time, white space, basically great piece of technology, produces structured data out. Sorry, it is a digital platform. But what it's done is actually replicated the old process, which made it so easy for people to adapt. I think it was great, superb, another game changer along with PPL. But I really think that we need to be, as a business, saying, okay, so that was what we did yesterday. What are we going to do tomorrow? How are we going to change? And to be ready for that. Now, that is something which we as a senior management across this market need to be ready for. And if not, then step aside for the people who are, because this is definitely the future. And when everybody today can pick up their smartphone or tablet and do all their banking online and transfer money and pay bills and everything else instantly, then arrive in the office and you face the utter depression that can be dealing with the London market systems at times. It ain't a great comparison. And we wonder why people don't want to come into this business. Now, that's what we've got to change. And that's a challenge for all of us, I think, to adopt and take forward.
Do you think that'll come through sort of market initiatives such as the FAL, or is it about just individual organisations bringing innovative ways of working, and then suddenly there'll be a tipping point and we'll move off these central services and into something else? Can you paint a picture of how that might actually happen?
But this is not the question. First of all, the market is the people in the market, the companies that represent the market. It is the brokers, the underwriters in this marketplace. Lloyd's is a regulator, and it provides a framework within which we operate. But at the end of the day, it is there to serve what we want. They are there to deliver things that enable us to run our business. Because if we don't run our businesses there and take it elsewhere, there is nothing left. They're regulating absolutely sweet Fanny Adams. That is not what we really want. So we should stand up and say, this is the direction we want you to go in. You're looking after us in our marketplace. We want you to change. Let's go in this direction. Now, it should be a symbiotic thing, because, of course, they're also reacting and taking the pole across all of the contributors and the people who are paying the bills. Us, the brokers and the underwriters in the marketplace. So it's down to all parties really to drive this forward. I think there's a real willingness at the top of Lloyd's now to do this. Absolutely delighted with that. But I think through this, chat we're having here, it is clear that there is an appetite for change within the market. The only question in my mind is how fast we can achieve this. And that's down to the limit of our imagination.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I would say generally is optimism and excitement and enthusiasm. Occasionally we talk about digital as a threat. I do not see it as such. I'm fascinated by the technology that's coming in, the change in business models. It's creating a phenomenal challenge, but we should be excited about that challenge. That's what we've been about in the London market for years. And I do remember my first talk on this, somebody came up and said, oh, it's nice to see someone talking about it from a positive point of view. And I think that's what the key message for me on this is, and I've always said, is we need to embrace what's happening with enthusiasm and positivity, and not view it as some sort of disruption to how we do things. I think we just have to realize that not disrupting anything, it is just it's the new way. And we need to be, pushing that vision and bringing people along with us with enthusiasm and excitement. And I think there's a lot of people in the market who are of that mindset.
Mm.
Area of adoption, technology is there. The adoption has been slow in the past in terms of take-up. And I think that's starting to accelerate. I still think it has further to go, but there are steps in the right direction around adoption and people's mindset changing. I think that's a lot of it's changed this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are out of time. We're just a few minutes over our allotted time. So I would like to thank Brian, Stephen, and Adrian for their contributions. And I have a virtual round of applause for you. So here you are. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much again for attending. We're now going to go into a Zoom chat, so you can join us in there. The links just come up there in the chat, and it will appear as a handout as well. There we go. And we had lots of questions that were submitted in the chat. So if you bring those along, you can ask the panel, but also I hope everyone will switch their cameras on and get involved. So thanks once again for coming along. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you shortly in the Zoom meeting.